Hi there and welcome.
You're listening to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm.
My name is Avantika, and I'm a researcher exploring animal consciousness, environmental sustainability, and planetary health. I want to help bring animal perspectives to the table and transform our relationship with the natural world.
And I'm Barbara. I'm an animal communicator and retired veterinarian. My true passion is exploring the hearts and souls of animals and helping people come to a much deeper understanding of who the animals truly are at their core.
This podcast is for anyone who loves animals and nature and has an interest in their own personal and spiritual development. We'll bring you powerful conversations with fascinating people about animal and nature sentience, consciousness, and communication.
Thank you so much for joining us on this journey of love, respect, understanding, and care for the fellow beings who share our beautiful Mother Earth with us. Welcome, everyone, to Animals and Us, Voices of a New Paradigm. And today we've got another conversation with Avantika, who's been on a tremendous journey this last year. And the last conversation we had was about her time in Canada, in Eastern Canada. And then she stopped briefly in Belgium, and then she went to India. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Avantika, you're back. How
I
was India?
am.
How was India?
India, in a nutshell, just to get this conversation started, was pretty incredible. It was a transformative experience for many reasons. But yeah, in a nutshell, in a few words, it exceeded my expectations. Not that I had any, but it was really so wonderful.
Well, let's talk about that and what was so
Yeah.
wonderful, because I know on many levels it was wonderful for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And yeah, you
Yeah.
want to say
I think
something?
I think for starters, what was really special for me, for those of you who are listening who probably don't know this about me, I was born and raised in Toronto in Canada, but I did spend a few years of my childhood living in India. So between the ages of 4 to 9 years old, I was living in India and then came back to Canada after that and have lived there since. Um, so going back and then after I got back to Canada, I think I went visited India maybe twice after that. The last time I went to India was 2014. Like it was a long time ago, over 10 years ago. So the first really special thing about this trip was the fact that I got to go back to my roots and I got to go back to the country where my ancestors are from as an adult, as a researcher, as someone going in with a different lens, not as someone going for, a family wedding or to visit, friends and family, but to go there in a completely different capacity. And for those of you who are listening who may have missed this, I'm doing my PhD focused on intuitive communication with animals. And India was one of my field sites that was assigned to me. So I didn't choose it. It was assigned, it was already part of the project proposal. And so I had this opportunity, this beautiful opportunity to go back to India for 2 months last year. So um, I was basically there in November and December 2025. So going back there as an adult and learning about my own country was, and then connecting with the culture, connecting with some of my religious roots as well, some of my spiritual roots, where my family comes from, the things that I've been brought up with. That was really spectacular. It was something I couldn't have anticipated or imagined happening. But essentially, the values and the beliefs and the traditions that I grew up surrounded by, I had a chance to go back to India and kind of revisit those and understand them better, dive a little deeper into them, and ask questions about them. So that was really special. I felt so connected to my ancestors. I felt connected to my grandparents just by virtue of being there, so that was really special. And the city that I had spent most of my time in, one of my aunt's cousins lives there. So I was able to spend some time with family as well and hear about my childhood, hear about my mom when she was younger, hear about all these things related to the family. So that was really special. And then the other incredible thing, the reason I went there was to spend time with a professional animal communicator. And I knew early on last year that this individual, that I would have so much to learn from her. And um, so I had contacted her earlier in the year in 2025, asked her if it would be okay for me to come to India to meet her, to spend time with her, to learn about what she does, how she does it, to learn from her, be an apprentice, learn from her how to communicate with animals and so on. And she was incredible. She was amazing. She has this really beautiful way of combining different schools of thought together. So we're talking about, intuitive communication with animals and with trees and plants and all of that. But not only is she talking from her personal experience and her lived experience, but she also weaves in current scientific literature, things that she has read in books, um, things from different religious and cultural traditions around the world. She has also spent time with various indigenous communities around the world. She has traveled to many places. So you kind of get this very wholesome understanding, of this way of being, this way of communing with the world. Immediately, the feeling that I got is that she was so open to learning together. And I could also sense she's very much into the science behind all of this, far before I came into the picture or I came to her asking to spend some time with her. She's already on that track, she's already very much aware of what's going on out there. So I'm hopeful that this was a good fit for her too, because um, she's interested in bringing those two worlds together, science and spirituality. And for me, I don't see them as separate things. I think that, yes, in the past, that, we have, like in the world we live in right now, one gets a lot more attention in mainstream academia and in mainstream society and all of that. But I don't actually think that they're different things. And I'm hopeful that the time is coming that science can help us understand spirituality, and not that they're different things, and I don't think there is any dissonance or any, discrepancy between the two. I just think that we're learning how to use scientific methods now to understand spiritual concepts. And, that was one of the things I learned about in India, because um, on so many occasions, conversations looped back to Hindu traditions often, and what has been written in the scriptures and what has been practiced for centuries, and what um, Hindu mythology, for example, talks about. So that's also been very interesting for me, because it seems that some of these concepts they're not new. They're not new, and I'm not so surprised, because it's not like we're inventing something. We're not inventing this way of communicating with animals. Like, I think
Well, some
that.
of the gods, the Hindu gods, were half human, half animal,
Mhm.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah,
part of the tradition. Yeah.
yeah.
What did you learn? I mean, you went in having some background in animal communication, but it hasn't been your primary focus, it seems,
Hmm.
that you do it. But you were in these advanced workshops with advanced people doing this work.
Hmm.
What did you learn? What did you come out of it with?
That's a great question. I think, yeah, and I think I talked about this maybe last time too, that I sometimes hide behind this veil of being the researcher, especially now that, I can do that because that is officially my role here. But I think one of the things I learned in India is that whether or not I realize it, that I think I can and I do talk to the animals and I do talk to the trees and the plants. And sometimes I do it purposely and intentionally, and sometimes I don't. And for me, talking to them and communicating with them is part of like a bigger web of things that is happening in my life and that does happen in my life. And um, so I'll give you one example. So in one of the workshops, I met this man who has so he's a business analyst around my age. He's a business analyst full time, but he's also into astrology and communicating with animals and Vastu, which is like, I guess, like an ancient Indian version of Feng Shui. So he's very much into all of that. And he invited me onto his podcast to, talk about the research and all that. So he had this idea that after he would ask me some questions he asked me if I was open to kind of trying a few things, trying a few exercises on the spot to just see what happens. And I was like, okay, like I'm open for anything. I was like, I can't guarantee, but I was really on the spot. So I was like, okay, sure. So he had a few exercises in mind. Like, okay, the one was we'll each find a picture of something on our phone, something that is not people, like not a picture of humans, but something. And the other person will try to guess what it is. And he had a few things like that we would try doing. So I said, okay, I have no idea what to expect, but let's try it. Like I'm up for it. So I went first in the sense that he picked a picture on his phone first, and I had to guess. And and no pressure, right? Like it was him and I, and we were in a studio with two people who were recording us. So we even had like a little bit of an audience. And I was like, okay, like let's try. So he's holding up his phone and he says, okay, like, what are you getting? Like, what do you think it is? So immediately, I think for like a split second, my brain went into like problem solving mode. It's like, okay, shape, color, what is it? It's like you're trying to find the image, right? You're like, okay, what are you? What am I looking for here? But very quickly, I realized like that needed to stop because that rational part of your brain that's trying to find answers needs to kind of chill out a bit.
Yeah.
So for a split second, my brain went into this like, okay, what are you? What is this image I'm trying to find? I'm trying to locate details about this. But then just all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know, I'm seeing a hand, some fingers, maybe. I can't remember exactly what I said, but I said a hand for sure. And I opened my eyes and I'm thinking, okay, maybe there's, you know, more to come. And I know those of you who are listening can't see this, but I will let Barbara explain what this picture is of. So I opened my eyes maybe 2 seconds after I closed them, and I told him, I'm seeing a hand, some fingers. And he's like, say no more. And this was the image.
Oh my God. It's a hand, it's the shadow of a hand holding some round thing,
Yeah,
um, like a ball or something.
yeah,
But it's
yeah.
really focused on the hand. That's amazing.
And I was, I mean, theoretically, yes, I believed I could do it. It's like, of course, like, I think everyone has these kind of capacities. But then to actually like that, I was just in shock for the next few days. I still am because you know, I just could not, even though I'm studying it and I'm understanding it and I think it's real, it's totally possible to actually experience that is something completely different.
Oh yeah.
And with that much clarity, like it's very clear that it's a hand, it's not an abstract picture of any sort. So I think I realized in that moment that, whether I um sit there and do this intentionally and communicate or don't communicate, that I think that it is happening, you know, all the time. Because I think and that's the other thing too, right? I learned over my fieldwork period is that communicating with animals isn't just happening in like a bubble. It's not like it's, you enter this bubble, you communicate with animals and you leave. Like it's a part of something much bigger. It's a part of something much greater. And it doesn't just end at animals. It doesn't just, it's by honing those skills and tuning into those capacities that we all have, we're opening ourselves up to everything. It's not just the
Yeah.
animals, right? So your intuitive capacities are all growing and all flourishing. And one application of that is maybe talking to animals, and communicating with animals that way. Um, and yeah, I think, I kind of walked away from that particular exercise thinking, like I really underestimate myself even, because I think
Yeah.
um but that's what I mean. I think what I'm trying to say is that I think that inherently in the work that I'm doing, I would like to believe that the animals are influencing what I'm doing all the time. That's what I'm trying
Oh,
to
yeah.
say, is that even if I'm not sitting there asking them, questions or, you know, going to a park and seeing a bird and talking to the bird, even if I'm not doing that, I think that they are part of everything I'm doing. And I actually think that's how the world works. Like there's a collective consciousness that we're all tapped into anyways. So the thoughts and ideas that are in our minds don't just belong to us. To think that they do is quite arrogant and um that's what we've been taught to believe, right? Like this is my idea, this is my intellectual property, this is um my writing, these are my words. And yes, you are a channel, you are a medium through which that is happening. But I don't know, this is just something I've been thinking about more and more. I think the possibility that that wisdom and that insight is coming from multiple sources and from like a collective field of intelligence, I think the possibilities of that are much larger than
Yeah.
um, one person having an idea that has just come from their brain.
Right.
You know?
And I think we've talked about this before, but something that I really have been feeling more and more and more over the last few years is that when we talk about animal communication, and people get intimidated often because they're afraid they won't be able to talk to the animals or receive their messages or whatever it is. But I think it's so much more than that,
Hmm.
that the actual words that some people receive is a piece of it, a little piece of it, where there's
Hmm.
this whole, like you said, this collective consciousness that comes through us, through the animals, through the trees, through everything. And it's not just about words by any means. It's all kinds of different sensations and insights and thoughts and feelings and the whole
Yeah,
gamut. So to
yeah.
speak from my perspective, and I know not everybody feels this way, but from my perspective, animal communication per se is only a piece of
Hmm.
what we're doing
Yeah,
and what we're capable of.
yeah. And I think also that when we're open to guidance and we're seeking guidance and we're open to getting insight, then it will come to us through the path of least resistance. It will come to us in the fastest way. So whether that's through numbers you're paying attention to, or whether that's through the animals you're talking to, or if you're in the ocean every day swimming, and that is where, you
Mm.
can access that wisdom and that intelligence. Obviously I can't definitively say that that is the truth, but that's an idea that I think, I spend a lot of time thinking about. And I think that's really powerful. So, and some people will everyone will gravitate towards something different, right? Which is why some people find it really easy to talk to trees, and some people will work with, we have a mutual friend who works with stone, and she carves stones, these beautiful sculptures. And, I know from her, she says that they talk to her. So I think also each of us have different um, inclinations and different sources that we get that kind of inspiration and guidance from. And the
Yeah.
animals can be one source. But I do think, I'm starting to feel that when you open yourself up to learning about this, then yeah, then that door opens, you know. And it's not just the door opening to communicate with animals, it's that door opening to all of that, to say, I'm ready, I would like to listen. Like, I understand that there is intelligence and wisdom and consciousness and sentience in all beings. And, you know, only wonderful things can come from that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So the animals are one vehicle, and there are many, you know, people have different ways of opening to that consciousness. It could be through the angels, it could be, like you said, in the ocean, it could be all kinds of things.
Right. Right.
Animals are one that we love, and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there are many ways of opening.
I agree. And I think though that when, I think when we do it through this pathway, at least this is my belief, this has been my experience, that there is a respect and appreciation that can grow for animals that I think is in our best interest. Um, so I think when people, this is just my own personal belief, and I hope that research can, maybe show some evidence of this in the future, maybe in the near future, let's see. But just that by um, diving into this topic and learning about it and being open to it, that it can change how we show up,
Yeah.
in the world. It can change how we perceive animals. It can change how we treat them. It can change how we see them, how we understand them. So, whether or not that is where we draw our inspiration from and get our wisdom from, I think at the very least, learning about animal communication can help us understand them in a way that, and that's not just the cats and dogs and horses that we love so much, but it's all the beings. It's the spiders, the ants, the reptiles, the, you know, birds, all the beings. Like, they all hold consciousness and intelligence. And um, so that's one thing I think is really powerful about this particular pathway. Um, learning about the uh, that kind of dialogue that can happen between humans and animals. I think that can be really interesting and powerful.
Yeah, and to take it a little further, for me too, what I always remember is somebody said, "What you love, you will not harm," or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
when you know something, when you know someone, when you know an animal, you're far less likely to want to hurt them. You're more likely to
Mm-hmm.
want to protect them. And
Right.
so for
Yeah.
me, that leads to some kind of advocacy and guardianship for the animals and for all of nature
Right.
when you really get to that level and can feel it, let
Yeah.
yourself really feel it,
Yeah.
it opens up so many things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, that reminds me of a conversation I just had very recently with the friend who I met at the workshop. And I was asking him, did anything change in your perception of animals or your relationship with animals after taking these workshops? And at first he said, no, not really, because I always had a lot of respect for them and I always loved animals since I was a child. So it didn't really change anything. But, as someone who asks a lot of questions, I
You don't ask a lot of questions. Oh my God.
so I picked and prodded and I kind of, reframed my questions and I kind of pushed a little further. And then he ended up changing his mind. He said, actually, you know, um, yeah, I guess it did, because he explained to me how, while he had an appreciation and a lot of respect for all animals, there was some that he misunderstood. So, where he lives, there's an issue with the leopards, and the leopards who come and they will eat the dogs in the community. And so he always he always, he never quite understood that and always felt a certain way about the leopards. But after taking this course, after learning about this and kind of venturing into this pathway, into this world, he started understanding them differently. And, his relationship now with them has changed. The way he sees them has changed. So he said that animals that I misunderstood earlier, I feel like I understand them better. So, and that's for somebody who already loves animals. So imagine what it can do for people who don't have that. I mean, of course, someone who goes into this, who's open to learning about this will probably love animals to begin with. But I don't imagine somebody who doesn't care for animals wanting to take a workshop like this. But if they did, if they ever opened themselves up to it, I think it could be pretty powerful. And so, yeah, I think that's really beautiful. That's a beautiful example of how it can enhance, an already loving and respectful relationship.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you see a different perspective, right? You might see a different perspective. You might
Yeah.
understand things a different way than you did
Right.
before.
Exactly. But you can only imagine, how much we love our dogs, and to have one killed by an animal, it would be
Hmm.
devastating, and it would be really, really easy to become hateful and angry and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So, and you think about, for instance, elephants raiding crops and killing people when things happen, you can see where the animosity could develop. So to educate people on how to connect at this different level could change everything, because the animals also respond to what we're feeling. You know, if we're carrying
Yeah.
anger and animosity and fear, the animals are going to react to that too. So,
Hmm. Absolutely.
yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got a question for you. You've talked a lot about spirituality and how you were brought up and Hinduism and all that stuff. Um, because you were brought up in a certain culture with certain beliefs, do you think that's greatly influenced your perspective about animal communication and all the things you've been learning about through these experiences? How has that influenced you, and has it changed? Have your core beliefs really significantly changed as a result of all this?
Hmm. I think definitely the upbringing that I had and the kinds of things that we talk about in our family and that we're open to talking about and exploring, that definitely set me up perfectly for this. Um, I come from a family where talking about um, reincarnation and soul contracts and karma is very normal. That's part of, that's kind of those are foundational beliefs. Um, those are core beliefs. And believing in something greater than us, believing in guidance coming from other sources, ancestors staying with us and guiding us and always supporting us. Like those were things that, I kind of grew up hearing. Um, Animals were always missing from that. They were never part of that conversation, which um, I think is not unusual. Like I feel like from many spiritual traditions and cultural traditions, I think, um, over the, I don't know if they've changed over the years, but there's just, yeah, they're very focused on humans and the human experience. So when I learned about animal communication, when I first heard about it and started reading books and started listening to podcasts and watching videos, I realized like, oh, they're part of this world too. Okay. And to me, it was, there was no discrepancy there. There was no dissonance there. There wasn't like, wait, but that doesn't make sense. How is that possible? It was quite the opposite for me. For me, it was just, okay, that makes a lot of sense. And then actually the more I started talking about it, and especially since I started this PhD and started, sharing with family members and relatives that, this is what I'm going to go do, then all these stories come out about, myths and legends about, and not even myths and legends, actually, like even recently, just things that they have heard that have happened that really does show that there can be this kind of communication and communion between humans and animals. So I think that that background, that upbringing, those beliefs, those values primed me for this work, primed me for these interests that I've developed. Um and there was a part two to your question. The second question you asked was, has anything changed?
Oh, yeah.
You asked, has anything changed? Um, I don't think, uh, well, if it has changed, it has changed in the sense that that ex, that those beliefs, those understandings have just expanded. Now there are more characters involved in it, and now I feel like I can see a bigger picture. So in that sense, it has changed, but nothing contradicted anything. There was no. I mean, I think that diff- there are still some things that I think I hear different explanations, and like I don't have complete clarity on some things, but I also think that some of those answers are for me to find out for myself. This is something also that I've come to realize over time is I think many years ago I used to be like hungry for information. Like I want to know everything, right? Like somebody would tell me one thing and I would have 10 more questions. So I had that kind of like eagerness in me to ask questions and find answers. But I think now I'm moving to a place where um, some things other people can tell me, but I also recognize that they're telling me based on their experience and based on what they have learned and based on their filters and their lenses and their teachings. I think ultimately we all do that, right? We pick and choose what we want to believe in. And so I think now I'm at this place where I am picking and choosing what I believe in, but I also know that there are many questions I still have, and that it's going to be my job to ask those questions and to find those answers myself. And that no one's going to hand me like an encyclopedia of like everything I'd ever want to know. Um, I think that's why the research is really exciting, actually, because it will help me ask the questions, get some answers, and to document things along the way so that I can go back and find those answers myself, make sense
Very
of it
cool.
myself. Yeah.
Very cool. And do you know how lucky you are to have been raised in that environment? Because you probably, I think about me, mine was so different. My
Mm-hmm.
parents loved animals, but there was no spiritual context behind it. And it
Mm-hmm.
took me many years to get through that.
Yeah.
So you had a good start in terms of the spiritual teachings, and you
Yeah,
could
and
pick
I'd like,
one.
yeah, and I don't think anything is random, of course, either. So I think that, now where I am, I look back and I'm thinking, all those things prepared me for this. So I recognize that as well, that
Yeah,
it kind of had to be that way because that is what led me here.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Isn't that isn't that amazing how those things
mhm,
work? It's just amazing.
yeah, yeah,
You're exactly where you need to be right now, and it's very
yeah.
exciting. I'm excited for you.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I know I've said this so many times, but I will say it again. I feel really grateful. I feel very honored to be doing this work. I think it's really important work, and we're on the verge of big things. I think things are changing, and um, I have to be part of that change that I want to see in the world, right? So this is how I feel grateful to have had this opportunity to do this work. Um, you know, it's interesting in India actually, many times people ask me like, so how like one person asked me, how did you find this path? And I was like, I didn't. I didn't I didn't find this path. And then someone else chimed in. They were like, the path found her. It's like, sure, yeah, I guess. And people ask me, so how does one do their PhD on this topic? Like, what did you do your master's in? And what is the pathway to this? And how did you get here? And I was like, that is one loaded question. I cannot answer that in one sentence. Um, but yeah, my dream for the future, really, I mean, I have many. One of them, though, is that, in the next 10, 20, 30 years, that more and more people want to study this kind of stuff. And it's happening, and that momentum builds. And yeah, there's the ways in which we can study these kinds of phenomena, that they become stronger, they become more accepted widely, and they become better and better so that we can find answers to some really cool questions in life. Because
Yeah.
it's all happening, right? Whether we understand it or not, whether we understand the science or the mechanics of it or not, I believe it's all happening anyways. It's just a matter of discovering how and why. But it's like, before we understood how the sun or what the sun was, crops still grew. People still, they still, took advantage of it. They still understood that, okay, this is important in order for this to happen. And they still benefited from it. They didn't understand. I mean, can you explain how the sun works right now? No. But you know that if you're growing a plant that it needs sunlight. So, that's like a very loose analogy here, but just the point is that there are things that are possible that we don't yet understand. We
Right.
can still do them without knowing exactly how it happens. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this has been so much fun and incredible. And I feel like I'm going there with you. So thank you so much. And I'm sure everybody listening is just really uplifted and inspired by everything you've said. So thank you, Avantika.
Thanks for
And
having me on the podcast, Barbara.
you're so welcome. And so it's time to close, and we invite you to just listen to a blessing before we say goodbye. Thank you for joining us. We'd like to end this podcast by taking just a moment to be quiet, and we give thanks and blessings to these amazing animals that we share our lives with. They give us so much and ask for so little in return. We hope that you can keep the animals and all living beings in your heart and in your mind as you go about your day. Thank you so much for being here with us today.